José Alvarenga. In November 2012, an experienced fisherman set out on a deep-sea fishing trip off the coast of Mexico. However, a violent storm, which Alvarenga initially ignored, quickly canceled their plans by seeping into the boat's engine and blowing Alvarenga and his inexperienced companion, Ezequiel Cordoba, far off course. Their boat, an open skiff that was the size of an SUV and had only 2 safety features, made a mind of its own and sailed violently against the storm in the Pacific Ocean for the next whole week before finally reaching a calm and quiet shore. The problem: Alvarenga and his partner no longer knew where they were or how they would survive. However, Alvarenga refused to let the situation weaken his resolve. He tried saving whatever he could, including rainwater, jellyfishes, turtles, and even seabirds. But the conditions soon started to become dire, and the men were forced to drink turtle blood and even their own urine. Sadly, after 4 months, Cordoba could not consume any more of the unconventional diet and died of starvation. Reportedly, Alvarenga kept his dead body on board for the next 6 days for mental comfort and would talk to his corpse regularly to keep him from feeling lonely. Finally, on January 30th, 2014, after more than 400 days on sea, Alvarenga finally saw some land in sight and wasted no time in jumping into the water and swimming to the shore. He had made a landing on a corner of Marshall's Island, which were approximately 6,000 miles away from Mexico. 2 natives found him disoriented on shore in a state of extreme exhaustion, having lost significant weight and experiencing malnutrition. His incredible 438-day survival is the longest recorded at sea, proving that the human spirit can survive even the harshest conditions. Chilean Miners. Incident occurred at the San Jose mine in Chile's Atacama Desert, where miners extracted copper and gold. Approximately 2,050 feet underground, they began to feel strong vibrations deep within the mountain. Then, without warning, a massive explosion cut through the mine, creating a cloud of dust and debris around them. This explosion was triggered by a single stone block weighing around 770,000 tons, about twice the weight of the Empire State Building, breaking off and causing a chain reaction that sealed the miners inside. A total of 33 men were trapped, isolated behind a huge barrier of rock. For the next 69 days, the miners were trapped without knowing if they would ever see the light of day again. However, these miners were not the ones who gave up. Thus, inside their refuge, they organized themselves into work shifts, rationing their emergency supplies to stretch their food, a couple of cookies and a spoonful of tuna, into daily meals. Finally, a rescue operation began, and 3 different drilling plans were quickly set into motion to reach them. Plan A and Plan B used special raised-bore drills, which created tunnels by boring through the rock and then widening them, while Plan C relied on a powerful oil drilling machine. The miners themselves contributed to their rescue by working in shifts to remove debris from the drilling and strengthening the mine walls. On October 9th, after weeks of effort, the Plan B drill successfully broke through to the miners, and the focus shifted to bringing them back to the surface. To achieve this, a custom-built metal capsule called the Phoenix was designed to safely transport the miners one by one. On the night of October 12th, the rescue began when a worker was lowered into the mine to oversee the rescue. Just after midnight, the first miner was brought to the surface. Over the next 24 hours, each miner was carefully lifted out in a smooth, choreographed sequence. The Human Lightning Rod. Roy Sullivan wasn't just any park ranger. He was struck by lightning 7 times and lived to tell the tale, earning him the nickname Human Lightning Rod. Born in 1912, Roy began working at Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, where outdoor life came with more than its fair share of storms. His first encounter was in 1942, when a lookout tower without a lightning rod was hit multiple times. Trying to escape, Roy was struck, burning a strip down his leg and leaving a hole in his shoe. Lightning seemed to follow him as if one strike was not bizarre enough. He was hit while driving, working in his yard, and even fishing. During one strike, his hair caught on fire, forcing him to keep a can of water handy for emergencies. In his final strike in 1977, while battling flames on his head, Roy also had to fend off a bear trying to steal his catch. Talk about bad luck. Though he survived all these freak incidences, Roy's later life was filled with isolation and sadness, as people avoided him out of fear. He passed away in 1983, leaving behind a legacy of being a lightning legend. Miracle in the Andes. In 1972, a Uruguayan rugby team's chartered plane was on its way to transporting the team from Uruguay to Santiago, Chile, when it was struck by a disaster so deadly it became known as one of the most incredible survival stories ever. On October 13th, the plane crashed into a mountain and lost its right wing and then the left one, and then toppling down to the remote valley of Argentina near the Chilean border. The crash that followed was deadly and instantly killed 12 people, leaving behind 33 survivors. The survivors were left stranded at an altitude of 11,500 feet. Thus, they were faced with the harsh elements of cold and snow, and the only thing they could use for protection was the plane's fuselage. While the survivors had initially found some candy bars and wine to eat, it was clear that this couldn't last for more than a week. Facing starvation, the survivors had to resort to eating the corpses of the people who died amidst the crash. It was an extremely difficult decision, but it kept them alive. After an avalanche further destroyed their group, 2 survivors, Nando Prado and Roberto Canisa, decided to seek help. Despite being weak and malnourished, they trekked for 10 days through the uneven mountain terrain and to a peak of 15,000 feet, without caring for the freezing temperatures and altitude sickness. When they finally came across herdsmen, with whom they communicated about their situation by throwing notes tied to stones across the river. The herdsmen eventually transported them to a hut where they were served proper food, and the rescue teams were mobilized shortly. But even the helicopters struggled to reach the wreckage due to strong winds and dangerous peaks. 72 days after the crash, the remaining 14 survivors were airlifted to safety. The tragic journey later became known as the Miracle of the Andes. Tham Luang Cave. On June 23, 2018, 12 boys from the Wild Boars football team, led by their coach, stepped inside the Tham Luang's cave in Thailand's Chiang Rai province. But they did not know they were initiating a rescue crisis that would be remembered for years. Shortly into their exploration, heavy rainfall started turning their innocent adventure into a dire fight for survival. Deep inside, the cave flooded rapidly, leaving the boys stranded on a rocky ledge about 2.5 miles in. They relied on each other for comfort and strength, with no food and limited light. Coach Okene, a former monk, taught them meditation techniques to stay calm and conserve energy, while moisture dripping from the cave walls provided a small supply of drinking water. Outside, a massive rescue operation was initiated. Local volunteers, Thai Navy SEALs, and international rescuers surrounded the cave and crossed rising waters and other conditions to approach it. Until July 2nd, everyone had lost hope about the rescue, but British divers John Volanden and Rick Santon made a shocking discovery. They found the boys huddled together in darkness. Each boy was sedated to prevent panic during the dangerous journey out and fitted with a full-face oxygen mask. Expert divers then escorted them out one by one through the dark, narrow underwater passage, sometimes no wider than a single person. Tragically, however, one brave diver, former Thai Navy SEAL Samang Kunan, lost his life during the rescue while trying to rescue one of the boys. While the boys were being escorted outside, the assistant coach guided the boys in meditation to keep them calm amid the crisis. He also later issued apologies to parents and others involved to express his regret for the situation, and was also reported to be genuinely concerned of the boys' survival more than his own. Finally, on July 10th, with the world watching and breathing, the Tham Luang cave rescue mission was successfully finished, saving all souls. Aron Ralston. In April 2003, climber Aron Ralston was hiking in Utah's Blue John Canyon. He was attempting to climb upon a large boulder when it shifted its position and trapped Ralston's right arm against the canyon wall. For the next 5 days, Ralston direly tried to move the 800-pound rock or call for help. But since he was trapped 100 feet below the desert and 20 miles away from the road, no one could hear his plea for help. Initially, Ralston had enough food to keep him going, but a point came when he was forced to drink his own urine to quench his thirst. By now, Ralston was convinced he was not going to make it out alive, and thus started recording farewell messages on his video camera and carved his own epitaph on the canyon wall so the world could one day know that he had passed away. Ralston saw a dream, a vision of a future with the sun. He took it as motivation to survive. Thus, once he woke up, he broke his right arm in 5 places and kept amputating it for 1 hour using a knife until he was finally able to free himself. Ralston hiked down the 65-foot wall and was walking over to his car, which was parked 8 miles away from his position, when he came across a family who wasted no time in informing authorities and getting Ralston the help he desperately needed. Ralston lost around 40 pounds of weight and 25% of his blood volume, which convinced him that he was going to die due to loss of blood. Luckily, Being a true survivor, he survived and became a widely recognized symbol of bravery and resilience. Harrison Okene. On May 23rd, Harrison Okene began his routine as a cook on the tugboat Jascon 4 when disaster struck. A massive wave suddenly capsized the vessel, sending it sinking to the ocean floor off the coast of Nigeria. As water was quickly rushing inside every corner of the ship, Harrison rushed to open a jammed door nearby and escape, but unluckily he was stuck inside. Before he knew it, he found himself trapped in a bathroom as water poured in. For 2.5 days, he clung to life in the cold, surrounded by darkness, with only an air pocket to breathe. Harrison survived on the few supplies he had managed to salvage, which included some bottles of cola and a handful of food. The water surrounding Harrison had an abundance of crayfish in it, which slowly started feeding on his skin. Finally, on the 3rd day, he heard knocking from outside. A team of divers had come to recover the bodies from the wreck and, at first, thought Harrison's rising hand was also of a dead body, until he gripped his hand with another to show that he was alive. Diver Nico van Heerden described the moment as shocking, saying it's rare to find someone alive after so long underwater. Strangely enough, Okene decided to use this tragedy as his calling to dedicate the rest of his life diving to depths as extreme as 165 feet. Miracle Girl. On June 30th, 2009, Baya Bakari, just 12 years old, was on board Yemenia Flight 626 along with her mother, which tragically crashed into the Indian Ocean near Grande Comore. As the Airbus A310 fell from the sky, it broke apart upon impact, claiming the lives of 152 passengers, except Baya, who miraculously found herself alive and struggling to get out of the debris. With limited swimming experience and no life vest, Baya clung to a piece of wreckage, floating alone in the rough sea for over 9 hours, much of it in darkness. She heard other survivors at one point, but their voices eventually faded. The next morning, Bakari reported seeing a ship passing by, but because it was so far away, they couldn't spot a dire 12-year-old stranded alone at sea calling for help. As her hope was dying in the early morning hours, a private vessel, Simacom 2, arrived at the crash site and spotted her. Rescued and transported to a hospital, Baya was reported to have a fractured pelvis and collarbone, along with severe knee burns and exhaustion. After undergoing intensive treatment and surgery, Baya was finally reunited with her father in France. She gave the world an even more detailed account of her survival in January 2010 by releasing a French book called Moi Baya le Miracle, or I'm Baya, the Miracle Girl, in which she revealed that she wasn't aware of her being the only survivor until she was in the hospital being treated. Baya was mistaken in thinking that all the other passengers had landed safely, but she was the only one who had fallen out of the plane. John McCain. John McCain was a naval aviator who was on his 23rd bombing mission in October 1967 over the land of Hanoi when he was brutally hit and taken down by a Vietnamese missile. He tried to eject as early as possible, but ended up fracturing both his arms and one leg. To make matters worse, his parachute landed him where the Vietnamese forces wasted no time in capturing him. The officers dragged him ashore, while some others started hitting him with a rifle butt until his shoulder was crushed and he was badly injured. Then, he was mercilessly transported to Hanoi's main jail, where the officers ensured McCain faced every nightmare possible. Despite his injuries, the officers refused to treat him, and the interrogation and beating continued. At last, McCain was finally provided medical assistance when they found out he was the son of an admiral. McCain spent the next 6 weeks at a hospital where he lost around 44 pounds and his hair turned white. He was then transferred to a solitary cell where he spent the next 2 years of his life. He was released on March 14, 1973, after enduring 5.5 years of captivity. His resilience and refusal to accept special treatment made him a symbol of heroism and steadfastness.